The arrival of the Deathworlder fleet, a galaxy in shock. The galaxy had always been a place of order. Every species knew its place, and every conflict was measured. The alien nations, although diverse in their cultures and strengths, had learned to coexist in the vastness of space. Peaceful treaties were signed, borders were respected, and the cosmic balance held steady until that fateful day. It began with a whisper in the dark. At first, no one noticed. A few strange signals, fragments of static that didn't quite belong to any known frequency. The galactic networks dismissed them as background noise. But then, those signals began to grow louder, clearer, and more frequent. They came from the edge of the galaxy, an area where few dared to explore. No one had ventured that far for centuries. It was a forbidden zone, a place where only rumors about the Deathworlders remained. The Deathworlders. Few had seen them. Few had even survived to speak of them. They were a myth, a tale shared in whispers between the stars, a race of terrifying, brutal warriors who thrived on chaos and destruction. Their reputation spread like wildfire, and though many tried to find them, none had succeeded. Until now. Across the galaxy, alien fleets, diplomats, and governments scrambled to decode the mysterious signals. The messages didn't make sense at first. They were encrypted in a way no known civilization could understand. But as the signals persisted, they finally decoded a single phrase, a message that chilled the very core of every leader and ruler. The Deathworlder fleet is coming. A shockwave rippled across the galaxy. In every command center, military base, and council hall, a grim realization set in. The rumors were true. The Deathworlders weren't a myth. They were real, and they were coming. The Deathworlders had been silent for decades, hiding in the deepest corners of space, waiting. Now, they were moving. Their fleet, massive and beyond comprehension, was on its way. No one knew how many ships there were or how far they had come, but it didn't matter. The very thought of the Deathworlders moving towards the heart of the galaxy sent shivers down every spine. In the heart of the galactic capital, the High Council met in emergency session. Leaders from every corner of the galaxy gathered around the large table, their faces pale and tense. The Council had heard of the Deathworlders before, but only in stories. Ancient, fragmented tales passed down through the generations. They had been thought to be extinct, but now they were very real. And they were closing in on them. This could be the end, said the commander of the Galactic Defense Forces, his voice tight with fear. The Deathworlders have no mercy, no diplomacy. They crush anything in their path. A representative from the Vornok Collective, a species known for their sharp intellect and deep knowledge of ancient technologies, spoke next. We must prepare. If the Deathworlders are truly coming, we will need every ship, every soldier we can muster. We cannot face them alone. But no one had a plan. There were no tactics or strategies for dealing with an enemy like the Deathworlders. The galactic forces had been built to fight other alien species, not a force of nature like this. As the panic grew, the sensors on every planet in the galaxy began to pick up something. Massive ships, larger than anything anyone had ever seen, moving at incredible speeds. The Deathworlder fleet was coming, and it was not slowing down. The message came again, clearer now. The Deathworlder fleet is on the move. Prepare for arrival. This time, the galaxy didn't just hear it. They felt it. On every ship, in every city, the warning spread like wildfire. People looked to the skies, and their worst fears were confirmed. The stars, once a symbol of wonder and discovery, now felt like an endless ocean of dark, looming dread. The very thought of the Deathworlder ships crossing the vast expanse of space to enter their worlds was terrifying. Then it happened. In the distance, on the outer edge of the galaxy, the first glimmer of the Deathworlder fleet appeared. The ships were not sleek or elegant like the peaceful fleets of the Galactic Alliance. They were enormous, dark, and menacing, like monstrous shadows against the stars. There was no doubt in anyone's mind now. The Deathworlders had arrived, and as their ships moved closer, the galaxy stood frozen in terror, awaiting the fate that would soon befall them. The galaxy's last hope, a desperate plan. As the news of the Deathworlder fleet's arrival spread across the galaxy, fear swept through the streets of every major city. There were whispers of panic in every corner of the known universe. What could possibly stand against a force like this? The Galactic Council's emergency meetings had become frantic, each passing minute making the situation more dire. The Deathworlder fleet wasn't just another group of hostile invaders. No, these beings were different. Their very presence sent shivers down the spines of the most hardened warriors. They were brutal, ruthless, and merciless. It was said that even the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy would crumble beneath their might. And now, that very fleet was headed straight for the heart of the galaxy. Every species knew what was at stake. Entire planets could be wiped from existence if the Deathworlders had their way. The question on everyone's mind was simple: how do we stop them? The Galactic Council had never faced a crisis like this. They had dealt with political disputes, trade wars, and the occasional skirmish. But this was different. This was an extinction-level threat. The Council, made up of representatives from every corner of the galaxy, was now united in their fear, but divided in their ideas on how to defend themselves. "We have no choice," said Captain Reller of the Terran Confederation. His face was grim, his voice steady but filled with anxiety. "We need to strike first. We need to go on the offensive." The room fell silent. The Terrans, also known as humans, were not known for diplomacy. They were a fierce and determined species, but few thought they would be the ones to offer such a bold solution. After all, they were a relatively young species in the galactic scheme of things. Still, Reller's suggestion sparked a flicker of hope. The Deathworlders don't respond to words. They understand only force. Reller continued, his eyes scanning the faces of the council members. "If we wait for them to arrive, it will be too late. We need to launch a preemptive strike." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. But then, a voice interrupted from the back. It was Vera Khan, a representative from the Vornak Collective. Her people were known for their vast knowledge of ancient technologies, but even she seemed uncertain. "Do we even know how to fight them?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We've never faced such an enemy. Their fleet is unlike anything we've ever seen." Reller's eyes narrowed. "I'm not suggesting we attack blindly, but we need to show the Deathworlders that we won't go down without a fight." The council fell into a tense silence once more. They were all well aware of the risks, but they were also well aware of the stakes. The galaxy could not afford to lose this fight. Not now, not when the Deathworlders were so close. And then, the unthinkable happened. A message arrived. It wasn't from the Deathworlders, but from an unlikely source: the Zykar Coalition. The Zykars were a mysterious species known for their incredible technological advancements. They were elusive, even reclusive, but their technology was unmatched. It was said that their ships could cloak in the vacuum of space, making them invisible to all but the most advanced sensors. They could bypass any defense system. And now, they had sent a message. "We have something that can help," the message began. "But it's dangerous, and it will take time. You need to prepare." The council listened in stunned silence. Was this the breakthrough they had been hoping for? Was it the weapon that could save them? Vera Khan's eyes narrowed. "What are they offering?" she asked cautiously. The response came quickly. "We have technology that can disrupt the Deathworlder fleet, but it will require all your resources. The technology has been dormant for centuries, and it will take time to awaken it." Reller was the first to respond, his voice filled with hope. "We can do that. We'll give you everything we have. Just tell us what you need." The room buzzed with newfound energy. The Zykars were offering them a chance. A slim one, but a chance nonetheless. The council quickly began making arrangements, gathering resources, and coordinating with every species willing to contribute. Time was running out, and the Deathworlder fleet was getting closer by the minute. As the plan began to take shape, no one could deny the truth. The galaxy's survival rested on the success of the Zykar's technology. But was it enough to turn the tide against the Deathworlders? No one knew, but they had no choice but to try. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, the Deathworlder fleet continued its journey, seemingly unstoppable. They had no need for strategy, no need for negotiations. They would arrive, and when they did, the galaxy would be theirs. The countdown had begun, and all the galaxy could do was wait and prepare for the battle of its life. The race against time. Can the galaxy prepare? The clock was ticking. Every moment that passed brought the Deathworlder fleet closer to the galaxy. Their ship formations could be seen in the far reaches of space, their presence now undeniable. The fear that gripped the galaxy was no longer just a whisper. It had become a deafening roar. Time is running out, Captain Reller muttered as he stood before the strategic map of the galaxy. His eyes scanned the planets, each one marked with red as a potential target. The Deathworlders weren't interested in negotiation or surrender. They simply wanted to wipe out all who stood in their way. And they would do it with ruthless efficiency. On the other side of the galaxy, the Zykar coalition worked feverishly. Their hidden labs, tucked away on desolate moons and forgotten worlds, hummed with life. Experts, engineers, and scientists from all over the galaxy scrambled to activate the ancient technology that the Zykars had promised. But there was no guarantee that it would work. "It's the only chance we have," Vera Khan said as she watched the Zykars carefully calibrate the ancient systems. Her fingers traced the interface of a strange device, the technology almost alien to her, even with all her experience. The Zykars were not ones to trust easily, and this offer, though desperately needed, came with its own set of risks. But there was no time to question. The fleet was coming. Meanwhile, on the front lines, the alliance between the Terran Confederation and other galactic forces was solidifying. Every species, every leader now had to choose: stand and fight or flee. The Deathworlders would leave no one untouched. "The fleet is ready to move, Captain," said one of Reller's officers, his voice filled with a mix of nervousness and determination. "Good," Reller replied, but there was no joy in his voice. "We move as soon as we can. No matter what happens, we stand together. We will not let them destroy everything." But even as preparations were made, doubt began to creep in. Everyone knew the Deathworlders were no ordinary enemy. They were merciless, overwhelming, and fast. Their ships were designed for destruction, and their warriors had no equal. Could the galaxy, united in this last desperate stand, actually succeed? Reller didn't know, but what choice did they have? The Zykar message had come through once more. The last pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. The technology could disrupt the Deathworlders' fleet, but there was one catch. It could only be activated from one central location. It would require all the galaxy's combined forces to protect that location and ensure the device could be activated in time. The location was in the heart of the galaxy, a system known for its dangerous asteroid belt and hostile space anomalies. The Galactic Council had agreed to send their strongest fleets there to protect the Zykar's technology, but no one knew how long they could hold off the Deathworlders. As the countdown continued, the situation grew more dire. Back at the front lines, every fleet was preparing for the worst. Ships were being fortified, crews were trained in the new tactics, and every officer was briefed on their roles. The leaders of every faction now had to put aside their differences and work together for a single cause. Reller stood before his fleet, gazing out at the dark expanse of space, the Deathworlder fleet now within striking distance. "Hold the line, no matter the cost," he said, his voice steady but filled with the weight of the moment. "We're the last hope. If we fail, everything is lost." On the ground, a different kind of preparation was underway. Troops were assembling, ready to face the Deathworlder threat head-on. The galaxy's best and brightest had rallied together, all to stop the oncoming tide of destruction. Everyone knew that if they didn't stand together, they would fall apart. But it wasn't just about survival. It was about protecting everything they had built. Their homes, their families, their future. The Zykar's technology was their final chance, but even with it, could they actually stand against the Deathworlders? The tension was unbearable as the galaxy's last hope hung in the balance. Ships began to move into position. Soldiers boarded their transports, knowing that they might never return. Each person had one thought on their mind. This was it. No more running. No more hiding. The Deathworlders were coming, and the galaxy would either stand and fight or fall into oblivion. In the depths of space, the Deathworlders' fleet continued its relentless approach, unaware of the galaxy's preparations. They were the storm, and the galaxy was about to face its greatest test. The suspense continues to build as the galaxy prepares to face the Deathworlder fleet. The tension between hope and fear is palpable, and the audience is left wondering whether the Alliance and the Zykar's technology will be enough. Hit the final preparations, the calm before the storm. The galaxy stood on the edge of a knife. Every fleet, every defense system, and every soldier knew that the moment the Deathworlder fleet arrived, there would be no turning back. The final preparations were underway, but with each passing second, the pressure mounted. In the command center of the Terran fleet, Captain Reller stood, looking at the massive star map before him. The red dots on the map moved closer, signaling the Deathworlder fleet's inexorable march. His hands gripped the edges of the table, his knuckles white with the strain. "We can't hold them forever, Captain," a voice said from behind him. Reller turned to face his officer, Lieutenant Harris. Her face was grim, and her eyes were filled with an anxiety he had seen before. They had been on the front lines for years, but nothing compared to what they were about to face. "I know," Reller replied, his voice steady despite the storm of thoughts raging in his mind. "But we have no choice." The fleet had just received confirmation that the Deathworlders were just days away from entering the system. The galaxy's defenses were barely ready, and the Zykar's technology, while promising, was still untested in combat. The risk was enormous, but they had no other option. "We'll deploy the fleet to the designated coordinates as planned," Captain Reller continued, looking at the officers around him. "All units are to be ready to defend the Zykar technology. If we lose that, it's over." Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the other factions were facing the same pressure. The United Galactic Council had issued a final call for all forces to unite. Every species, from the most advanced to the most primitive, had to work together to stand a chance against the unstoppable Deathworlders. The alliances that had been frail for so long now had to hold strong. On a remote moon in the Zykar homeworld, Veracon paced restlessly. Her mind was consumed with the weight of the situation. The Zykar's technology was their best hope, but even that was a gamble. Would it work, or would it just be another tool for their destruction? "We've done everything we can," Vera said, speaking to the head of the Zykar Council, a tall and imposing figure named Zothar. His expression was stoic, but Vera could see the weariness in his eyes. The Zykars, though wise and ancient, had never faced anything like the Deathworlders. Zothar nodded slowly. "There is no other choice. We either activate the device or we perish." As Vera looked over the lab, she couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. The machines hummed softly, their lights blinking erratically. They were ancient, untouched by time, but also untested. They were the key to their survival, but would they be enough? Back on the battlefield, the other species of the galaxy were preparing their fleets. The Quora, the cat-like warriors who had a reputation for their brutal combat skills, were readying their ships for battle. The Ilari, with their vast technological superiority, were aligning their weapons and shields for what was sure to be an all-out conflict. Even the peaceful Koran, a race of highly intelligent beings, had agreed to fight. Every force, every species, was now part of the Great Alliance. Everyone ready. General Zila asked as she looked at the massive fleet of ships ready for battle. As ready as we'll ever be, one of her officers replied. Zila looked out into the vastness of space, where the fleet of Deathworlders was approaching. Her heart pounded in her chest. The fate of the galaxy rested in their hands. The tension was so thick it could be cut with a knife. But Zila had seen wars before. She had fought for survival. And this time, they wouldn't back down. At the central command of the Galactic Defense Forces, the unification of all species was reaching its peak. The message had been sent, the alliance had been forged, and the fleet of every species was now united under one flag. Survival. "We'll need all of you," Commander Talon of the Illyri fleet said in a broadcast message. "This isn't just a fight for us. This is a fight for everything we've built. We cannot lose." The mood was somber, but every species now understood the stakes. This wasn't just about survival. It was about protecting everything they had worked for. Homes, families, cultures. This was a fight for the future of the galaxy itself. As the Deathworlder fleet approached, every fleet leader knew this would be their defining moment. Would they be remembered as the saviors of the galaxy, or would they be nothing more than forgotten footnotes in the history of a galaxy that had fallen to the Deathworlders? The countdown to battle had begun. Every fleet, every soldier, was prepared to do whatever it took to turn the tide. The galaxy was united, but would it be enough? The first wave of the Deathworlder fleet loomed just beyond the edge of the system, its dark ships blotting out the stars. The unstoppable force. Deathworlders arrive. The calm was shattered as the first Deathworlder ships breached the outer boundary of the galaxy's defenses. The fleets that had gathered, unified in desperation, now felt the full weight of the threat looming before them. Captain Reller stood at the command center of the Terran fleet, his eyes locked onto the main screen. His grip on the console tightened, and his heart raced. The ships of the Deathworlder fleet, massive and imposing, filled the screen, their presence alone making the room feel smaller. These weren't just ships. They were war machines designed for one purpose: destruction. "They're here," Lieutenant Harris whispered, her voice tinged with both awe and fear. The Deathworlders, a species from a planet so harsh it was considered a death sentence for anyone who tried to colonize it, had evolved to survive in conditions no other species could. They had mastered warfare in ways that sent shockwaves through the galaxy. And now their fleet had arrived, bringing with it a terrifying promise of power. Reller's voice broke the silence. "All fleets, prepare for engagement. We hold them here. We cannot let them pass." Across the galaxy, every fleet was bracing for impact. The Quora, with their fierce feline combat prowess, aligned their ships in tight formations. The Illyri, experts in technology and energy manipulation, activated their shield generators, ready to meet the incoming onslaught. Even the peaceful Quarren had mobilized their ships, though their hearts were heavy with the realization that this might be their final stand. As the Deathworlder fleet moved closer, there was a shift in the atmosphere. The air itself felt charged, as though the universe itself was holding its breath. On the edge of the fleet, a group of Deathworlder ships separated, their sleek, black designs a stark contrast to the light of the distant stars. In the depths of the Zykar command center, Vera Khan and Zothar stood before a massive holomap, watching as the Deathworlder fleet inched closer to their position. The Zykars had built their defenses with one purpose in mind: to protect the ancient technology they had created. They knew it was their best hope. But the Deathworlders, they didn't care about defenses. They cared about one thing: victory. The first strike came without warning. From the Deathworlder flagship, a burst of energy erupted, tearing through space itself. The blast hit the Illyri's frontline ships, sending them into a fiery explosion that lit up the dark void. The shockwave rippled through the galactic forces, and for a brief moment, every fleet member understood the enormity of the threat they faced. "We're not going to hold them back," Lieutenant Harris muttered, eyes wide in disbelief. The Deathworlder fleet didn't pause. They didn't need to. Their ships were designed for this, to strike fast and hard. They tore through the ranks of the defending fleets like a blade through paper. Every strike they made was calculated, efficient, and devastating. But the galaxy wasn't ready to give up. Reller watched the battle unfold, his mind working rapidly. He knew the key to survival wasn't just in fighting the Deathworlders. It was in surviving long enough for the Zikars to activate their technology. That was the last hope. Keep pushing them back, Reller shouted. We need time for the Zikars. As his fleet engaged the Deathworlders, the Zikars activated their ancient devices, their hums vibrating through the ship's systems. But it wasn't enough. The Deathworlder ships were relentless. Their weapons cut through the defensive shields with ease, and their sheer force was overwhelming. Back on the battlefield, General Zayla of the Korra commanded her fleet with precision. Her ships darted through the chaos, their advanced weaponry firing in perfect synchrony. The Korra were warriors through and through, but even their might wasn't enough to slow the onslaught. The Deathworlders were simply too powerful. Across the galaxy, there was a growing sense of dread. The Deathworlders had launched their first wave with devastating success, and the alliance of species was beginning to feel the strain. Ships were destroyed by the minute, and many were retreating in the face of such overwhelming force. Where are the Zikars? Harris asked, her voice trembling. We just need more time, Reller answered, his voice as calm as he could make it. The Zikars are our last hope. And yet, with every moment that passed, that hope seemed to be slipping further and further away. The Deathworlders' fleet was methodical, ruthless, and unrelenting. They weren't just invaders, they were a force of nature. And the galaxy, for all its united strength, was beginning to crumble. The battle continued, a desperate struggle between light and darkness, between survival and destruction. But no matter how hard the galactic forces fought, they could not ignore the growing certainty that the arrival of the Deathworlder fleet had changed everything. The turning point, a glimmer of hope amid the destruction. As the battle raged on, the galaxy's fleets fought valiantly, but the sheer power of the Deathworlder ships began to feel like an insurmountable wall. Despite their advanced weaponry and highly trained soldiers, the Allied forces found themselves losing ground, ship by ship. The Deathworlders didn't relent. They pushed forward, their ships cutting through defenses with ruthless efficiency. On the Zikar command ship, Vera Khan paced in front of the massive holographic map that displayed the ongoing battle. Her eyes darted between the symbols of the shattered fleets and the distant glow of the Deathworlder flagship. Where are the reinforcements? Zothar's voice cut through the tension, a hint of desperation creeping into his tone. We can't wait for reinforcements, Vera replied, her voice steady but betraying the anxiety she felt. We have to make our move now. The technology is ready. From the far reaches of space, the Zikars had spent years perfecting their secret weapon, a device that could turn the tide of any battle. A weapon of such magnitude that even the Deathworlders could be stopped. But there was a catch. The device required precise coordination, and the cost of using it could be catastrophic. Vyra turned to the console beside her, her fingers trembling slightly as she activated the ancient device. Prepare for the burst, she commanded, her voice firm, though the weight of the decision she was about to make bore down on her. In the midst of the battle, the Deathworlder fleet was relentless, seemingly unbothered by the damage they inflicted. They moved as one, coordinated and lethal, making their way toward the heart of the galactic defense. It was clear, this wasn't just a war, it was an invasion, and the Deathworlders were determined to conquer. But then, something unexpected happened. A pulse of energy, bright and searing, shot out from the center of the Zikar fleet. It was unlike anything anyone had seen before. It illuminated the battlefield like a sun, its wave of energy sweeping across the galaxy, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. The blast reached the Deathworlder fleet, impacting their ships with a violent force that caused even their formidable ships to shudder. The sudden strike sent shockwaves through the ranks of both the defending forces and the attackers. For a brief moment, the Deathworlder fleet faltered, their movements slowing as their ships adjusted to the unexpected force. It was a sign of vulnerability, a crack in their otherwise impenetrable armor. But just as quickly as the attack had come, it ended. The burst of energy receded, leaving a galaxy in stunned silence. Both sides reeled from the impact, and for a fleeting moment, it seemed that the tides had shifted. "This is it," Reller whispered, staring at the damage on the screens. "We have them. Now we fight." The galactic forces, emboldened by the Zykar's unexpected strike, rallied. The Korra led the charge, their ships darting through the gaps left in the Deathworlder fleet's formation. The Ilari unleashed their most potent energy weapons, aimed directly at the vulnerable points revealed by the Zykar's strike. The Deathworlder fleet, although powerful, was not invincible. The attack had left them temporarily stunned, and the united galactic forces seized this opportunity. In an instant, the battlefield became a chaotic melee, with both sides scrambling to assert dominance. On the Terran flagship, Captain Reller could feel the shift. His crew was invigorated by the sudden chance to strike back, but they knew this was a fleeting moment. The Deathworlders would soon recover, and the tide would turn again. "We've got to hit them hard and fast. No mercy," Reller ordered. As the Deathworlders regrouped, their ships began to regain their composure, and the true extent of their might began to show once more. But the galaxy's fleets weren't about to go down without a fight. They pressed forward, fighting with everything they had. Every laser blast and torpedo launched a desperate plea for survival. In the midst of the chaos, Zothar's voice crackled through the comms. "We've done it. The device. It's not finished, but it's enough to stop them temporarily. We have more time. Time to regroup. Time to fight." The word sent a ripple of hope through the command centers across the galaxy. The Deathworlders had been momentarily staggered, and the galaxy now had the chance to regroup and take the fight to the invaders. However, everyone knew this was only a brief reprieve. The Deathworlders were not easily deterred, and their fleet was already preparing for their next move. The galaxy's forces had bought themselves precious time, but the real battle was just beginning. The question remained, could they hold their ground long enough to turn the tide? The next moments would determine the fate of the galaxy, and the Deathworlders knew it. The final confrontation. The galaxy's last stand. The battle raged on, with the galaxy's forces pushing forward, driven by the slim hope that they could actually win this war. The Deathworlder fleet, though temporarily weakened, was far from defeated. The temporary disruption caused by the Zykar's energy burst had given the galactic forces a window of opportunity, but they knew that it wouldn't last long. Captain Reller stood on the bridge of his ship, looking out at the vastness of space. The once bustling battlefield had now turned into a chaotic dance of destruction. Explosions flashed as ships from both sides collided in combat, their once pristine hulls now scarred and torn. "We need to end this, or we'll be the ones on the receiving end," Reller muttered to himself, his gaze fixed on the gathering storm of Deathworlder ships. The enemy fleet had recovered, and their deadly, relentless nature was on full display. But even as the Deathworlder ships lined up for another assault, something had changed. The Deathworlders weren't just fighting. They were adapting. Their tactics were shifting, becoming more precise and deadly with each passing moment. They had learned from their earlier setback and were now pushing with greater force than before. "We can't keep up like this," Lieutenant Orin said, his voice tense. "They're too strong, and our fleet is running low on resources." Reller clenched his fists, but his eyes remained calm. "We have to. We can't let them win." Across the galaxy, fleets from every corner of the known universe had mobilized for this one final push. The Zykars, the Korra, the Ilari, and even the Terrans had come together, unified under a single banner of survival. Yet, despite their combined strength, the Deathworlders' dominance was still undeniable. In the depths of space, the Deathworlder flagship loomed like a giant predator, its massive shape casting a shadow over the battlefield. Its weapons powered up, crackling with energy, ready to unleash destruction on any who dared stand in its way. Inside the flagship, Supreme Commander Agar had a front-row view of the carnage. His face was cold, unreadable, as he watched the chaos unfold on his view screen. The Deathworlders had fought their way through countless battles, leaving nothing but ruin in their wake. They were a force of nature, unstoppable and unyielding. "Commander, the galactic forces are putting up a fight, but it won't last much longer," an officer reported. "They are desperate. They've thrown everything they have at us." Agar's lips curled into a grim smile. "Let them. This war ends today. The galaxy will fall, and their cries will be nothing but a whisper in the void." But even as he spoke, something unexpected happened. A small group of ships, barely a handful, emerged from the shadows of a nearby nebula. They were human ships, old, rusted, but unmistakably Terran. The fleet had come from a long-forgotten human colony, one that had been left behind in the wake of earlier galactic expansions. Captain Reller, one of the Terran commander's voices crackled over the comms. "We've arrived, ready to fight." Reller's heart skipped a beat. These ships were ancient, their designs outdated compared to the sleek, modern warships of the other galactic forces. Yet they were driven by the fierce, unwavering spirit of humanity. It wasn't their technology that made them formidable. It was the resolve of the soldiers aboard them. The very essence of Deathworlders. "We'll need everything we've got," Reller said. "Hold nothing back." The moment the Terran fleet entered the fray, the entire battlefield seemed to shift. The Deathworlders had expected nothing more than a token effort from these forgotten ships, but what they didn't realize was that these vessels were led by men and women whose ancestors had survived the harshest conditions the galaxy could throw at them. In the midst of the chaos, the Deathworlder flagship fired its main weapon, sending a massive beam of energy hurtling toward the galactic fleet. But before it could make contact, a Terran ship, the Vanguard, suddenly appeared in the path of the beam. The ancient ship's hull groaned under the strain as it absorbed the full force of the blast, yet it held firm. The sheer mass of the ship, combined with the unyielding will of its crew, made it a formidable barrier. A cheer erupted from the galactic forces, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, the Deathworlders hesitated. But that hesitation was all the galaxy needed. Captain Reller saw the opening. "Now, hit them with everything we've got." The fleets from all corners of the galaxy charged forward, their weapons blazing. The Zykar, the Ilari, the Quora, and the Terrans united in a single moment of fury. The Deathworlder fleet was massive, but it wasn't invincible. Slowly, the tide began to turn. The Deathworlders, despite their immense strength, were being pushed back. Agar growled in frustration. He hadn't anticipated this resistance. But as his fleet began to retreat, a cold realization set in. This war was far from over. The Deathworlders may have been forced to pull back for now, but they would return. They always did.